Hey everybody, I'm Neg Primer and welcome to the Beginner's Guide. So we're going to try something a little bit different than we've normally done in the past with this. Although I have played games in the past that I've played prior to that, this game right here is actually one that I didn't play, but I saw a full playthrough. So this is actually going to be a full spoiler cast, I guess. I don't know. We're gonna go fully into spoilers. I'm going to actually kind of give you my interpretation of what is going on in the game as I play. So before we do anything, I'm gonna make sure that full captions are turned back on. So again, this is your final warning. I will be talking spoilers about the whole game. The whole game's only about like an hour long or so, maybe an hour and a half, and I'm going to just play it straight through, and I might go back and cut it in half or something. But like I said, spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Let's get into it. Yep, it's on. Yep.
Hi there. Thank you very much for playing The Beginner's Guide. My name is Davey Wreden. I wrote the Stanley Parable, and while that game tells a pretty absurd story, today I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened between 2008 and 2011. We're going to look at the games made by a friend of mine named Coda. Now, these games mean a lot to me. I met Coda in early 2009 at a time when I was really struggling with some personal stuff, and his work pointed me in a very powerful direction. I found it to be a good reference point for the kinds of creative works that I wanted to make. So just to start you off, this is, I think, the first game he ever made. It's a level for Counter-Strike. You can walk around here, by the way. And mostly it's just Coda learning the basics of building a 3D environment. But what I like is that even though he starts from the simple aesthetic of a desert town, he then scatters these colorful abstract blobs and impossible floating crates around the level. And of course, it destroys the illusion that this actually is a desert town, and instead this level becomes a kind of calling card from its creator. It's like a reminder that this video game was constructed by a real person. And it kind of makes you wonder, what was going through his head as he was building this? This is what I like about all of Coda's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator. I want us to see past the games themselves. I want to get to know who this human being really is. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, it's 2008, Coda starts making these games, and he never releases any of them. He doesn't put them onto the internet, he just makes them and then immediately abandons them, and they sit on his computer forever. And I think he really understood this image of himself as a recluse. At one point he jokingly renamed his computer's recycling bin to Important Games Folder. So, you know, this was just how he worked. He tended to crank them out one after the other without even really pausing to try to understand what he had just made, until suddenly one day, he just stopped. In 2011, that was it. He made his last game, and then he hasn't made another one since. And that's why I've taken this opportunity to gather all of his work together, is because I find his games powerful and interesting, and I'd like this collection to reach him, to maybe encourage him to start creating again. And if the people like you who play this also happen to find his work interesting, then I'm sure it'll just send that much stronger of a message of encouragement to Coda. So thanks for joining me on this. If you have a particular interpretation that I haven't mentioned here, or if you just need to get in touch, you can email me at daveywreden@gmail.com. Okay, that's about it for introduction. Let's take a look at Coda's first proper game. As each game is loading, I'll show you the date that it was completed. This first one was made in November 2008.
Okay. So, before I move forward, hopefully it's not going to start talking over me. I am going to still try to be quiet while he's talking. That'll make for kind of an interesting experience because that's most of this game, actually. It is very, like, him telling a story, and you're kind of just in the experience of going through this Coda's levels. So, if we, again, I've told you all spoilers. If you made it this far, then I don't feel guilty about telling you spoilers. And also, a lot of this is going to be my interpretation. And I feel like I'm in kind of a unique position over a lot of the people out there because I am working as a game designer. Obviously, I'm not at a professional level, but I am working as a designer. And so I can kind of relate a lot of the experiences of this game to you guys. So, with that in mind, first and foremost, I don't really believe that Coda is a real person. Coda, I believe, is representative of his creative side. So it is Davey Wreden. There's two characters in this game. There's Davey Wreden, who's the narrator, who's the creator. He also created Stanley Parable. And then there's Coda, who's the guy who has made all these levels. And Coda, like I said, I don't think is a real person. I don't see any real, I'm like 99% sure it's not a real person. It's just representative of his creative side, the side of him that creates for the sake of creation. And as we play through the game, I'll explain that a little bit more as we get to the different parts that make me believe that. So that last level was just a level he made for Counter-Strike back in 2008, and then he moved into making this.
Warning. Whisper machine active. Shift destruction imminent.
This game is called Escape from Whisper, and it's one of the more generic games you'll see from Coda.
Right, so this is kind of just first-person shooter. It's an interesting one. I don't have much to say about it right now. Actually, I think ultimately there's not a whole lot to say about it.
Security call breached. Hostile alien life form inbound.
So they're talking about hostile alien life forms.
It kind of looks like this game was abandoned mid-development. For instance, you have this gun, which you'd think would indicate that there are supposed to be monsters or enemies somewhere, but then clearly there are no enemies anywhere. You can't even reload the gun when you run out of bullets. But ultimately we don't really know. Maybe Coda thought that actually it was complete the way that it is. And I think that we should talk about his games for what they are, rather than for what they're not.
Enemy force neutralized. Begin shooting.
I love how you can see the bottom of the universe from this room.
So, made in Unity. That's a pretty generic skybox. You can see, like right above my gun, right there, right where I'm touching. That is actually a seam because the box, the skybox is literally just a box. We're in the inside of a giant box right now, essentially. I'm gonna turn up my game audio here. It's also really weird because I'm using a new headset that I actually just got today, and it doesn't transfer my voice into the mic at all. So we have that.
Apparently the space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know. There's really no reason for it that I've ever been able to discern, so in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip you on past it.
So, him skipping me through areas of the game is gonna be kind of a recurring theme that you'll get.
This is the part that's interesting. The game has this narrative about the Whisper machine and how it has to be turned off, and then you get to the engine room.
Again, so Coda, the supposed creator of this, I believe, is representative of Davey's creative side, and Davey himself is the actual like designer side. So that's the side that thinks about how to move through games, how to teach players how to move through games, how to build a level, how to do all that stuff, like all the actual like knowledge, rather than just plain ability and joy of making. That's Davey. They are two distinct individuals.
In the engine room, you could save us all. That beam is powering the whisper machine. We could disrupt it by introducing a great enough heat signature. If your body could stop the beam. It's so much to ask, but for all of our lives, would you do it? Could you give yourself?
Okay. Oh. It's interesting the door has an open noise, but not a closed noise.
Let me pause here for a second. What you just experienced, stepping into the beam and then dying, is probably what Coda had initially intended when he was developing this level. But when he first compiles and plays it, something goes wrong. There's a bug somewhere. And this is what happens instead.
Right, so again, pay attention to the words that he uses there. That's the experience that Coda probably intended. So that's not the game. The game as it was, I had to find my way through the labyrinth, and then come in here, and then step into this beam, and instead of dying, it does this. Which, by the way, is no accident. Unity, this has to be coded.
Floating. And this is an important moment for him. Because yes, this is technically a glitch, but Coda identifies something human about it. Like how small it makes you feel in the face of this larger chaotic system. Or this floating could be the afterlife, a peaceful place, juxtaposed against all of the hysteria that you've just had to traverse. I don't even know. I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain. He wants to do more of these really weird and experimental designs. So he stops work on this and moves on to a stream of tiny little games that go in all sorts of directions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first game he made after leaving this one behind.
Okay. So I guess technically that could be a glitch, but I don't get the impression... oh yeah, it's this game. I don't get the impression that that's what he had intended, or rather that floating up in the air is what he had intended. It could be he accidentally destroyed the rigid body or something, something along those lines.
So try walking backwards.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. The past was behind her.
Yep. In this game, you can only walk backwards.
Yep. Which is kind of an interesting mechanic, actually. But the future...
So it's a short and relatively minimalist experiment combining motion and narrative. It is less advanced than the previous game, but actually it seems to be more focused, more complete. Coda's trying to give it a unique voice rather than simply basing it on a pre-existing trope.
When she stops and looks, it becomes clearer. So... This is something to keep in mind, is that this is all Davey's interpretation of what's going on in his games. But if the future is always behind her, how will she find the strength to confront
It's a short little thought, it says what it wants to say, and then it ends. Didn't need anything more than that. Which to me is why it works, because it gets out quick. Okay, next one.
Alright, so you can see, his actual abilities to make games are getting better. This is kind of a weird one, because you're tied into, an ultra-narrow corridor. And then you have just basically a light in a circle around you, up from above. And you are now entering... This is interesting, because this is actually kind of hard to do, I believe. I haven't messed around too much with the lighting systems in 3D environments. But to get this level of blackness is pretty requires at least a little bit of work, although I'm sure there are assets.
And that's it. Okay, the meaning of this game won't be clear just yet. Please be patient with me for a few more games, and I promise you'll see what makes it interesting.
And he says that.
Oftentimes, Coda would put bizarre titles like this one at the start of his games.
Does he? No, that's one of the things I was trying to remember.
He would really only talk to me about his work as he was making it. Once he stopped work on a game, like, that was it. It was dead to him. And I don't agree with that at all, but what are you gonna do? I know it's tempting, but there's actually nothing over here. Sorry.
So this is actually just a straight up Unity. I think they actually got rid of the skybox altogether for this one. But yeah, it's all just standard, fairly standard Unity stuff. That's not really the default gray, but it is basically just quick, simple material that you can throw over everything. The actual interesting thing about this is that right there requires a lot of work to get a little hole into the side of one of these things. Means he had to build the rest of it. Not a ton of work, but a bit. And hello. Facebook is going off.
Once you've been slowed to an absolute crawl, the door at the top of the stairs opens. So why, if Coda's not showing these games to anyone, why bother opening the door at all? Well, to show you, I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself.
Actually, I'm curious. Sorry, people, we're actually gonna run this out for a bit. I want to see if we can actually get there without it. But this is actually kind of interesting because once we get up here, and again, this is a full spoiler, so if you don't want to know until you see it yourself, then you're fucked. But what's up here is actually just a bunch of like random ideas that Coda has to make games. And you can see I'm actually still jumping at full speed. I'm still able to look around at full speed. But this is basically Coda's thought process. And actually, before we get in there too, I want to cover this. Part of this game is about not overanalyzing stuff. But it is like it's kind of one of those ironies, I guess, where he made a game that Davey Wreden, not Coda, but Davey Wreden here made a game that is so worthy of being analyzed. But I don't think most people will understand where he's coming from. And to be honest, I'm not sure I even understand. Much like Davey in the story, I'm just giving my own interpretation to it. And I'd like to... I know some people that have been questioning whether they want to continue on as game designers after playing through this game, seeing what it has to say, and understanding more about Davey Wreden and his life. I wonder if they're going to move me up to full speed when I get in here. But yeah, so all these early games are just Coda. It's just him implementing ideas he has and doing stuff just straight up for the heck of it, and not really expecting anybody to ever see it or to enjoy it in any capacity or anything like that. It is entirely for his own purposes. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that they weren't expecting anybody to actually go through the trouble of doing this. Which is interesting, because then he doesn't know gamers very well. Here we go.
A room that's warm and nice and filled with
comes with manuals and gives you
games.
incorrect instructions how to play. So these are just floating texts out there.
Coda would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said that he knew that he was actually a vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that. It can be a very slow climb to get there.
The walking sound effects change. The jumping ones. Game where you collect items except the game automatically quits after you collect them all. Ready, set, fish. So, again, I don't know that most of his games have an opening title card like that. So again, full spoilers, one of the big things that you'll hear from Davey as we progress is that he has gone back and added all manner of things into these games in an effort to try to make sense of them. In the last level, we saw the ability to warp forward. We've seen that. We saw him force me to warp forward through the labyrinth. We saw him change the ending of the Escape from Whisper one. He changed that so that you would die rather than just float up into the air. And that's kind of a recurring theme with Davey, is that he will go through and change all of Coda's games after the fact, when Coda didn't care. Coda just wanted to make games for the pure hell of it.
Well, this is new for Coda. It's an actual puzzle. Go ahead and see if you can solve it.
Yep, come in here. There's nothing, right? Yeah.
Don't forget that solution, because we're going to see this puzzle again soon. We're going to see it a lot.
And these 3 dots appear everywhere as well. So this door does appear all over the place. And I believe in the canon, I guess, of this game, Coda probably put those there and not Davey.
So that seems to be it, right? You walk down a corridor, you solve a puzzle, you get to the end. Simple enough. Alright, now I'm going to modify the game again, so that when you press enter, it'll remove all of the walls from this room.
So again, that right there is all Coda wanted you to see. Davey is the one that has changed this, so now we can see all this.
How about that? There was more to it than we had any way of knowing. I actually find it funny that this game comes after the Stairs game, since they essentially convey the opposite idea. So, in the Stairs game, a dull exterior concealed a rich interior. And then, in this level, a dull interior hides this fantastic outer world. Either way, I think that the point is the same, is that most of the time you don't get to know what you're missing, or even that you're missing anything. That's not your role as a player. So if your role here is not to understand, then what is it?
It's to not understand. And now we're back at this. So again, so presumably, and I don't know that I really believe this, so a lot of these games were presumably made by Davey Wreden, according to basically the time frame that he was putting these out. This all culminates in 2011, which I believe is the original release date for Stanley Parable. That should kind of give you guys a big hint there. But that last level, I'm not really entirely sure what the other corridors were about. I'm not sure if that was something that he actually created, back when he was Coda. Yeah. And I think... So we're just back in this thing. You're now exiting.
Aha. So, this, combined with the entering game from earlier, tells us that Coda believes his games are connected somehow. It could even be that the Stairs game and the puzzle game are literally connected in between this and the entering game. There's a bigger picture that all of his games are meant to play a role in, some larger meaning that we won't be able to grasp until we've seen all of them. And once we have, we can step back and start to understand what exactly that bigger picture is.
And again, Davey is full of crap. The Great and Lovely Descent. So yeah, that last one, there's no guarantee that Coda was the one that made that and bookended the other levels together like that. That could entirely have been Davey going back to it and projecting his own stuff on there. So rather wait like Matrix-like worlds here.
Let's talk about video game development for a second.
Yes, let's.
Every video game runs on what's called an engine, which determines what the game can and cannot do.
Unity
so in
and
other
Unreal.
words, the engine is a set of tools for game development.
Yep, and he used, I'm
To make all of these
pretty
games,
confident he
Coda
used
is
Unity
using
for
an
all
engine
these.
called Source. Like all engines,
well.
Source has certain things that it does well, and it has certain things that it does poorly. One of the things that it does very well is boxy linear corridors. That's why so many of Coda's games are set in these large, flat, empty rooms, is just because he's working with what the engine does well.
So he says that.
The tools available
I don't know,
to the
I've never
creator
used
shape
Source.
what kinds of creative work they're going to end up making. You might
almost get
consider
stuck
paying
there.
attention to the architecture in Coda's games, to notice how they seem to stem from an engine that's very good at producing linear, boxy corridors.
There's a toilet. I just made one of those earlier today. Uh-oh. So, there's a couple different things you can do here. The first is you can actually try to platform your way down. I want to take a minute and see if he actually says anything when I do. He doesn't seem to be interested in talking. So let's start jumping down there in leaps and bounds. Yeah, he doesn't seem interested in talking. But yeah, so this is, I mean, this is just kind of weird. I don't know. This would actually be fairly easy to make. Although this does a pretty good job of actually guiding the player to where they're supposed to go. Well, as you can see, there's actually 3 different ways I could have gotten to the bottom from right up there. There's just a big cylinder here. Again, this is all just really interesting because there's nothing to it. And Coda was just crafting a level because he liked crafting a level here. This was, like I said, I believe my understanding, my interpretation is that Coda... Wow, okay, I'm sorry. Coda just likes doing things for the pure fun of it. I guess that's the game. Sorry, there's this weird thumping noise. And I guess my new headphones, since they have a built-in sub, are distracting me. What? I want to go that way. Alright, so it's a bit hard to tell what Coda's responsible for and what Davey is responsible for.